Welcome back, everybody. Our next guest has spent years researching Canada's waste management system, and what he has uncovered may surprise you. Joining us now on Earth Day to tell us why we should think more critically about the way we recycle, research scientist Calvin Lakhan is back. Hi, Calvin.
Good morning.
Calvin, let's start with the basics, because many Canadians sort of give themselves a pat on the back when we toss things into the recycling bin. But you say that creates a false sense of assurance. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So while this is a feel-good activity, it actually doesn't do good. So in fact, recycling isn't even what's best for the environment. We have to remember that reduce, reuse, recycle isn't just a catchy phrase. It's an order in which we're supposed to do things. So much of what we put in the blue bin doesn't actually get recycled, and our residential recycling program just isn't working. For context, the cost of Ontario's Blue Box program has ballooned to more than $350 million, while recycling rates have only gone up by about 4% over the past 18 years. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the goal of a waste management system, and what are we trying to achieve? And in my opinion, recycling isn't it.
Wow. Like, just hearing that, we're already like, what are you even saying? Okay, so let's move beyond just the individual consumer here, because one of the biggest issues facing us right now is that a lot of the types of packaging that products are coming in are not even compatible with a lot of the recycling factories, the infrastructure that we have that we think can recycle this stuff. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So I think the foremost issue is that, as you noted, our recycling infrastructure simply is not compatible with the types of packaging that we're using today. Our recycling system was largely designed around the recovery of very specific materials. And so this includes newsprint, cardboard, boxboard, aluminum cans, etc. The public readily recognizes these items as being recyclable, and generally speaking, they can be economically and efficiently collected as part of the Blue Box. However, the packaging of today is increasingly comprised of lightweight multi-resin plastics, and in many instances, these packages are actually not recyclable at all. So we run into an issue is that Canadians actually have a love affair with recycling, and policymakers at both the provincial and federal level are telling us to recycle everything, everywhere, and to put it all in the bin, even though it can't really be recycled.
Well, you recently made a very interesting point when you said that being a good environmental citizen is a luxury and a privilege as opposed to a right. Can you explain that, what you mean by that?
Sure. So environmental equity, particularly as it pertains to waste, is a neglected and poorly understood topic. When we think about sustainable solutions, they're often promoted to the public. They want us to buy local, avoid big box stores, buy reasonable products, and avoid fast fashion. The ability to actually engage in those behaviors is largely dictated by income. All of these activities come at a premium, and we have essentially developed a two-tier system where only the affluent can afford to be good environmental citizens. This is problematic for a number of reasons. First and foremost, sustainability is premised on three pillars: economic, environmental, and social. If the solution being put forward excludes minority or marginalized groups, how on earth can that be sustainable? The second issue is that there's an element of judgment when one group is seen as participating in environmentally desirable behavior while another is not. So groups who don't participate are often judged as being less informed, less educated, or even caring less about the environment. None of these things are true, though. People are excluded from participation simply because they can't afford to. Lastly, I think that many aspects of environmentalism have been co-opted by more affluent groups. And so what I mean by that is that the solutions they put forward not only fail to recognize the economic reality of marginalized and racialized people, but they aren't actually useful to the people that are most affected by environmental harm.
Oh my gosh, you are just like speaking some stuff today, Calvin. Okay, another thing that I think a lot of people can relate to, at least during this pandemic, is the massive rise in the use of single-use plastics for various reasons, and a lot of it done in the name of safety during this pandemic. How has our relationship with single-use plastics changed and evolved over the last year of COVID?
Sure. So first and foremost, I want to preface this by saying that not all single-use plastics are created equal, and not all single-use plastic should be seen as bad. And so as you noted, the pandemic has really brought to light the importance of single-use plastics for PPE, as well as the role that plastics can play in promoting food and product safety. With that being said, I think there are opportunities to minimize our consumption of single-use plastics where we can. There's some really promising initiatives and products that are offering consumers alternatives, which previously didn't exist. So increasingly, you're seeing large retailers offer something called reusable packaging in products, which allows households the opportunity to return used containers back to a designated point where they're cleaned and refilled. And that kind of minimizes the need for new packaging. Anytime there's an opportunity for reuse, whether that be purchasing reusable food storage containers or buying secondhand items, these are things that should be encouraged. Unfortunately, the way in which our retail and food systems are designed are not really conducive to reuse. In many instances, there may not even be a reusable substitute for single-use plastics. What I'm personally most excited about is the use of compostable bio-based plastics, which mimic the properties of conventional single-use plastics, but they are composted instead of landfilled. And many companies are finding innovative uses for compostable plastics, and we're seeing a growing number of compostable packaging on store shelves. Identifying opportunities to use compostable packaging in lieu of single-use plastics is critical in working towards a more sustainable packaging system.
So we've talked about how recycling might not be everything that it's chalked up to be. So it feels like one of the things that we can do is being more mindful of our consumption. I want you to dig into that. How can Canadian households implement changes to actually make a difference instead of just throwing stuff in that recycling bin?
So the University of Guelph has pioneered research in the area of food waste and avoidable food waste in particular. And even though most households feel as though we're doing a good job when it comes to not wasting food, the waste audits of these very same households tell a very different story. More than 40% of organic waste generated by households was classified as avoidable. And so that's quite literally thousands of dollars of food that Canadian families are sending to landfills each and every year. It was only when households are asked to be cognizant of their consumption and look at how much waste could have been avoided that they began to ask themselves the question, what do I need to satisfy my requirements? This is actually a surprisingly difficult question to answer, but I think the most critical takeaway is that we need to actively think about what we buy, why we buy it, and what do we do with it. Always remember that our foremost goal for managing waste is avoid making it in the first place.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this next question clearly falls in the, like, what do I buy versus what do I need? And in the former category, I'm a parent and I have a 7-year-old daughter. And I think a lot of parents out there know that toys and their packaging, the amount of waste that is created is mind-boggling for just one child. So if you're a parent like me who wants to be more environmentally friendly and conscious of the waste that toys and packaging are producing, what kind of advice should we be following?
Yeah, houses with young families, particularly during the pandemic and what I call the e-tail era, are probably drowning in Amazon boxes and styrofoam packing peanuts and toy product packaging. And unfortunately, many of these materials can't really be recycled, or at least not readily so. So what we really have to think about are what are some practical tips that we can implement to minimize our packaging footprint. So firstly, where possible, look for product packaging that has a recycling logo or is made up of materials that are accepted in your municipality's blue bin. Generally speaking, try and avoid packaging that is made up of hard plastics or anything with a wax or plastic coating. Packaging with stickers, film wrap, and tape should also be avoided if possible. A second option is sometimes it's possible to make recycling easier by separating out packaging into individual material types. So as an example, dolls and action figures often come in packaging that's made up of both cardboard and a clear plastic shell. Since we know cardboard is readily recyclable, you can separate the two materials from one another and put the cardboard in the recycling bin. In fact, depending on what type of clear plastic and what it's made of, it may also be recyclable. Lastly, and I think it's the most important one, is buy secondhand. The stigma surrounding secondhand clothing and toys has diminished significantly since I was a child. And with thriving online marketplaces, you can purchase used toys and largely avoid the excess packaging that often comes with new items. Plus, you save money. So it's really a win-win for both you and the environment.
Finally, Calvin, we've spoken a lot about what consumers can do here, but change needs to happen at all levels, obviously. And you've called on the government to rethink its approach to recycling. What does that look like to you?
So moving forward, we need to focus on solutions that are flexible and adaptable, that changes inevitably, when things change over time. So we need reflexive legislation. Legislation should also be outcome-based. So as an example, we need to keep packaging out of landfills. but give producers and service providers the latitude to develop their own solutions to divert materials. Policymakers need to understand that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Site and situation-specific factors will make some diversion strategies preferable to others, depending on the circumstances. Remember, reduce waste first, then reuse it, and at the very last, that's when we should try to recycle it.
Oh my gosh, I just love this. Just redefining the 3 R's, mind-blowing and eye-opening stuff, Calvin, especially in time for Earth Day. Thanks so much for this information.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be back after this.